I really appreciate the heads up. And let's get back to the show. So, speaking of the delusions that propagated the First World War, one of those delusions was this notion of the stab in the back. The Jew that lurks and that stabbed us in the back and prevented us from winning the war. Now, the reality of it is Germany was busted. Not just busted, they were literally in the midst of a revolution. The military went to the Duke and told him, this is a mutiny. Like, your forces have mutinied. You have no capacity to attack or anything else. You need to bring down the conflicts. You need to settle this. You need to come to some level of a resolution. We have no capacity to defend ourselves. But when it goes to World War II, they don't think of it in these terms. It gets thought of purely in the terms of, well, I mean, our forces came back home. I mean, they were standing up. We didn't destroy Germany. It wasn't destroyed. So there had to be something that calls it stab in the back. I want to talk about it in terms of our current day and time. Russiagate, the conspiracy that has gone on for the last 3 years. And I know that there's some people under my voice that are Democrats, and they full well believe in this notion of Russiagate, despite Comey coming back and saying, we have nothing to show for this, making the connection between Trump and Russia. It's not there. And they immediately jump to this notion of obstruction of justice. Well, it's like obstruction of justice for something that didn't happen. At that point, you're getting a little silly. Nevertheless, they've ran with this for 3 years, a conspiracy theory, one after the next. And the media will come after a story, and the story would end up being wrong. Recently, bitter ender, Russiagator, Lawrence O'Donnell came out with a story talking about Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank says we have subpoenas, or based on the subpoena, we have information related to Trump's returns. Well, O'Donnell, not content with the being burned, but all these other people being burned, and the Rachel Maddows of the world being burned with this kind of conspiracy theory that she was pushing, he didn't go with this in soft tones. He went open mouth and saying, I got a source. I have this one source that tells me that the people and what they have are loans signed by Russian oligarchs. And this would explain everything that has taken place and why Trump is so nice to Vladimir Putin. The very next day, you have a situation where, within 2 days, where he has to come back and say, my bad. And he has to come to account and apologize for the story, saying, oh, look, we didn't go through our rigorous scanning and our rigorous,
Hi, you have reached.
We didn't go through our rigorous procedures under normal circumstances. And so we apologize for this. And literally has to essentially walk it back. And then my question was, but why? Why didn't you go through your quote-unquote rigorous, and that's laughable, Brian Williams worked on MSNBC, so to give you rigorous anything. But why didn't you go through those quote-unquote rigorous procedures that you typically go through? Why on this particular story? And it just seems like on stories dealing with Trump, they have a tendency to do that. What I want to talk about is something that's more vital, and I think is even more worrying than the conspiracy theory of Russiagate. It's the intelligence services that literally tried to take down a president. Now, people look at this and say, no way, no drama, Obama would never do that. Well, I'm not saying Obama tried to do anything. What I am saying is that there were elements of the intelligence services that did not want Trump in that office. And they took actions within the discretion of the powers that they had available to them to try to either keep him out of that office or ding him and create this war of attrition while he was in that office. Why do I know that? Because the Inspector General came out and told me so. Maybe not in all of those words, but for all intents and purposes, so that's what we're talking about. Comey was chastised by the Inspector General. And basically, their point was, they decided to get information from Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele was paid for, essentially, by Clinton people who did not like Trump, because initially the person who was paying for the Christopher Steele and the information from that dodgy dossier were people who were associated with Republicans. And then Clinton, and then at some point our own intelligence services. Meaning Christopher Steele, a UK intelligence guy, was essentially being paid by our own intelligence services, including the opposition. And this was taken as the basis to start to get a warrant, a FISA warrant. It's this extraordinary in and of itself. Now, we're told that Trump was working with the Russians, and this is in and of itself enough to go after Trump, except for the fact that Christopher Steele is a British intelligence agent. Why is it okay for Clinton to work with the Brits, but Trump to not work with the Russians? And I'm not even saying there was no even evidence that Trump was working with the Russians in these terms. I guess I'm saying, if they're going to use that argument, why is it okay for Clinton to work with the Brits? Now, what they say is, well, she was paying Christopher Steele, and because she paid Christopher Steele, a Brit, the intelligence services, in order to get essentially a bunch of conspiracy theories to slander Trump with, that makes it okay. Okay, if that's the argument you want to use. Here's the catch. They knew that Dossier was dodgy. They knew Christopher Steele had political motives in regards to his attempt or his want to try to get that information out into the public sphere before the election. Comey, Brennan, and there's one more I can't think of off the top of my head, goes to Trump. And when they go to Trump, they tell him and have a conversation with him about the most salacious details in what they already know to be a dodgy dossier. Now, Comey stays behind after the other intelligence services guys leave, and Comey has a conversation with the president. And he tells him all of these salacious things. Oh, somebody peed on the bed. They peed on the bed. Did they do that? Yeah, they peed on the bed. That's what they're saying. And then Comey comes out, having taken amazing notes, and what do you know? It hits the press that Donald Trump was briefed on salacious details of a dossier that the Russians apparently had, that the FBI and intelligence services now has at their disposal, and we are off to the races. Because now what the media says is, oh my God, somebody peed on the president. And they run with it. They don't care whether or not it's true. They don't care how much of it's nonsense. And the fact that the FBI, even Comey himself has said that the thing was dodgy, doesn't matter. It is a feeding frenzy. You have people who hate Trump's guts, in which case it makes them feel a little better about themselves that their candidate lost. And you have media who hates Trump's guts because, let's be honest, he's horrible to the media. He lies completely. And so there's this kind of conflict between that. You have a large segment of the population that greatly disliked Trump. And so it made it okay to run with this particular conspiracy theory. Here's the catch. In a situation where Comey has been chastised by the IG, and it seems that the private conversation that Comey had, that the goal of this was to leak it to the press. Meaning, I hope you understand what I mean by this. They get a dossier that's dodgy. That dossier that's dodgy comes from Christopher Steele, essentially a UK MI6 guy. With that dodgy dossier, they go about getting a meeting with Trump. After they get this meeting with Trump, Comey stays behind and gives them the most salacious details of the dossier. Comey comes back out, and it hits the media that the president has been briefed on a dossier with all sorts of salacious details. Now, at this point, the media runs with it. Doesn't really matter if it's true. You've initially initiated what has become this notion of Russiagate, and they've ran with it. Now, the catch becomes, their goal in this was to tar, in a war of attrition, the president of the United States. Now, I'm not saying this as somebody who loves Trump. I'm saying this as somebody who's bothered by this notion that a president that may be disliked by a political party can be attacked and taken down in ways that go beyond any notion of earnest politics. And that the intel services seems to be the lead, you could say, tip of the spear in trying to make this work, using the media as almost this kind of useful idiot in trying to run with this particular narrative. The problem with this is that the reality of it is, it's not a Trump-Russia thing. And from the standpoint of a democratic process or democratic order, the notion that you can take down a president in this way is problematic. That could be President Bernie Sanders. That could have been President Hillary Clinton. That could have been President whoever. If you let this president sit without investigating how all of this started, we've been in a conspiracy theory for 3 years. Shouldn't we know how all of this started? I don't know if what's his name is going to get to the bottom of this. Meaning Durham, that's the guy who Trump, who's the Attorney General William Barr put in on top of this particular investigation. But I got to be honest, we've been engulfed in a conspiracy theory for 3 years. I mean, for 3 years, they told us that Trump was working with the Russians, Trump was working with Putin, Trump was being told what to say, Trump was being told what to do. And in this entire time, they completely ignored Trump pulling out of the INF treaty, Trump putting weapons in space, Trump making Space Force, Trump attacking Venezuela, Trump attacking Iran. All of these are Russia's allies, and any ally of Russia is essentially an ally of China because Russia and China have a military contract. All of this gets skated over in lieu of Trump and Russia.
Good point. Good point.
Well, they just ignore the aspects of that particular thing that are problematic to their goal, considering we have gotten closer and closer and closer to these kind of military conflicts. I mean, Pompeo has joked that we've killed Russians in our conflicts. And for the most part, Vladimir Putin never raises that, because if he raises it, he's stuck with the fact that it's raised.
He has to deal with it then. Yeah.
He has to deal with it. So, again, thinking about historical context, the stab in the back, I would say if you were looking at that, if you're living during that time, you'd have thought, most people would have thought that, yes, that is indeed how we lost that war. That is indeed what took place, and they were completely and entirely wrong. I'm saying history is a living thing, and in the same way they were wrong about that, it is very possible, likely, have a little bit of doubt, that all of these Russiagators are wrong about this. I mean, look, because most people I talk to never even considered the alternative thought about this. Like, they would say, well, I mean, what about that troll farm? It's like, well, how do you know that troll farm wasn't just a capitalistic thing? I mean, honestly, logically, if my job was to sell clickbait, I want people to click on these particular items, I am going to put out clickbait that corresponds to what is taking place within the same point of the country. Meaning, when it's Easter, I'm going to put out Easter stuff. When it's Christmas, I'm going to put out Christmas stuff. If there's an election, I'm going to put out stuff pertaining to the election, because I want people to click on things that are relevant. Like now, on my channel, people click on items that are more pertaining to the election because they care about the election. Mm-hmm. That is a capitalistic impulse that makes more sense than this notion of the majority of these click things happening after the election. Meaning, it's like it makes zero sense in that context, where they're going to have a clickbait farm that was in existence prior to the election, and that most of the clickbait stuff that they put out after the election had nothing to do with this stuff, So I would just push people and prod people to have a little bit of doubt in regards to this being hard on this notion of Russia is working with Trump, because up to this point, it has not been demonstrated in the least, and we are 3 years in with a Congress and with a intelligence services that seem hell-bent on finding something, and up to this point, they have nothing.
Well, unfortunately, they found a lot of very unsavory people in Trump's orbit.
Oh, I don't doubt he's corrupt.
Yeah.
I don't doubt he's corrupt at all.
But I think that begs the bigger game, and that's what I'm curious about. You're right. There's a lot of misplaced emphasis, and no doubt the strategy of people going into intelligence trying to create a case. Like an editor might create a story.
Yeah.
Whatever news they can find or leave out.
Well, the thing is, Comey was leaking it, though. Like, when Comey's
Comey
goal...
blew it.
Yeah, well, his
Comey
goal was to he was literally leaking information in order to sort of press can hit Trump
with... The same thing with Hillary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Why the FBI was ever allowed into politics, I do not know. I'm suspicious of the FBI, I don't see how that level of person gets to say that level of thing and distort that much of the country's business.
Yeah, I agree. So, looks like we have a phone call, or do we?
I think so. It's a 321 number.
Let's see.
WRWK.
We might have a phone call.
Hello?
Guys, if you want to call in,
Yes,
804-464-1089. That is the number that we have at the radio station.
Yeah, you called into the talk?
804.
You called into the show, okay.
464
okay, who's calling?
1089.
John Charles from Florida. This is Don Charles from Florida who would like to talk to you?
Go for it. What's going on, Don
Hang on a
Schultz?
second, Don Charles. Hey, get your mic down.
Is it Don Schultz?
Is it Don Schultz? Don? Oh, hang on one second. Don, hang on to you. I haven't got your mic up yet. We have a very primitive system here. This is a volunteer station, and we have a... Anyway, give me a second and I'll get you... Okay, now we got you on speaker.
All right, so we have Don Schultz. He wants to. What do you want to talk about, Don?
Part of it would.
Go ahead.
I don't hear him.
You may have to turn the radio down. There's a lag on Facebook.
Oh.
And it's been story nonsense and stuff to be retracted, corrected. People have to, days, weeks go by after the initial story comes out and it's turns out the story is false. And it's just been a repetitive cycle for the last 3 years, and it's consumed the media, for the mainstream media for the last 3 years. And because of that, nobody really talked about what really happened in 2016.
Yeah. I agree. I totally. I agree.
Yeah, that's the point. It's like a manufactured disaster instead of the real one, so you can't figure out what's going on.
Well, I mean, and there's this other thing where they're screaming Trump and Russia at the height of their lungs, but they were doing so in order to cover the fact that they lost. And so it's like, you have certain people who are, I don't want to call them necessarily useful idiots in the process, but I think that people they couldn't grasp why Clinton lost. And they didn't, they were told that Clinton was going to win. I think Huffington Post had Clinton winning like 98% to 2% chance. And so, these people coming out absolutely shattered. They have no paradigm to take into account how this woman could lose. Whereas if you would have talked to me earlier that morning, I couldn't see how she won.
Yeah, I have the same feeling.
I mean, the Sanders supporters kept telling you she's going to lose. There is no enthusiasm for this woman. And yet they forced her through. And she goes up against Trump. She doesn't even go to Wisconsin. She chooses Tim Kaine after they cheat Bernie Sanders, meaning a socialist nearly beat her in one of the most capitalistic countries on the planet. And yet they still ran that race with a certain degree of hubris and brinksmanship. It's extraordinary. If they want to know why Trump is in that office, I suggest they look at the way they ran that race and the person who they put up for that contest. It's not Trump and Russia. It's not the Russians. And even if you're going to make this argument that something nefarious took place, I suggest you look at what the Republican Party was doing in the standpoint of shaving off people from the voter rolls.
And the same thing's happening now.
Yeah.
CNN is spinning the debates. Who knows what's next? I mean,
CNN shouldn't have access to debates.
We're in the same process now. I would like Tom Steyer or somebody with lots of money to just buy airtime and have a debate among the actual popular people.
Media should not own debates. Like, if you ran the debates, they would ding your channel for a copyright strike, meaning CNN essentially has made some kind of agreement where they own and control the debates. But understand what that means. We're talking about a democratic process where we're using...
It's like a sports team. They bought the sports rights.
Yeah, they bought the sports rights.
Game, yeah.
And so CNN, who literally, in this process, has a dog in the hunt. CNN, if Bernie Sanders puts Medicare for All through, this notion that these guys are going to be getting money, like they're filling their coffers with cash, is a no-go. That's not going to happen at all. I mean, this notion of drug companies advertising on the media, we don't even know if that's going to happen anymore, meaning they're perfectly aware that their coffers could be lessened by certain policies that are enacted, which gives them a certain impetus to act in particular ways or ask questions in certain framing in the debate. That should not happen. I mean, and what the last debate with CNN was a perfect example. It's like, hey, you want to get us out of those foreign wars. Trump wants to get us out of foreign wars. How does people know you're not like Trump? Like, what? What? Are you serious? Did you really ask that question? Like, that's the nonsense that CNN was asking. And Sanders kind of made the point there's going to be a drug commercial run on this network. And he was right. Those drug commercials ran during a debate where they were talking about Medicare for All, where they were trying to stop those drug commercials from running.
Waiting in the wings, saying, I'll let you check as soon as you get in our corner.
It's a certain corrupt process. They should not own the rights to something that is a purely democratic process. If debates are going to be the thing where we judge our candidates by, then there needs to be a certain degree of public stake in that, almost like a C-SPAN thing, not necessarily something that corporations and companies just own. I mean, I find that to be utter lunacy. It makes zero sense to me. None. All right. So speaking of debates and whatnot, new polling is out. And, I'm one of those people who follow polls. I think polls are awesome. And I think they give you a snapshot Not so much that any one particular poll is perfectly accurate, more so that when you're kind of taking a group of them, you can see trends and directions in regards to public support and public will. In my case, talking about polling, the last poll that came out from Monmouth showed that Bernie Sanders caught one Joe Biden, with Joe Biden falling, 13 points in that poll? And across every demographic, collapse. Now, other polls showed Joe Biden lead lessening also. So that Monmouth wasn't necessarily an outlier in that context. Emerson comes out with another poll. Now, the people who are on the YouTube channel should be able to see this. Biden, 31%, Bernie Sanders, 24%. And in the latest Emerson National Poll, former VP continues to lead the Democratic primary at 34%, similar to the numbers found in both Emerson's July national polls. Sanders gains ground from the previous poll, up for a second time in a row from 20% to 24%. Now, I would make the argument that this is evidence that electability only goes so far. I've asked the question, how many times can Biden get on a stage and gaffe, have a mental conniption fit, mental impairment? And it goes beyond that now, because it's not just mental impairment. We have to either own up to Joe Biden is a flagrant habitual liar, or Joe Biden has something mentally wrong with him. And I will let you be the judge of that. And I got to be honest, either one of those should disqualify him from this process. Joe Biden couldn't remember Obama's name. Think about that. He is literally running off of Obama's reputation. He is rubbing himself in Obama at every moment that he can get on stage. Oh, Obama, there's a black audience. Obama. Forgot his name. How do you forget Obama's name? More than once, by the way. Not just once, more than once. At one point, the indignity of not even knowing where he was, saying how much he loved Vermont this year. However, he was in New Hampshire. And this goes along with this notion of incoherent, ramblings, the mumbling on stage, kind of making these kind of weird things about Obama getting shot, not being able to remember details and dates. I mean, those things are becoming an issue. Joe Biden last week made up a war story where he was pinning a medal. He's like, don't pin the medal on me, sir. He died, sir, he died. None of that happened. That's not true. The only thing that happened in that story was somebody got a medal pinned on him. Everything else in the story was false. Even the Washington Post was like, all right, dude, come on, dog. Come on. Now, a vote for Biden is a vote for Trump. The argument against Trump is that he is a habitual flagrant liar. And Joe Biden has one instance after the next where he is making stuff up. And there are stories that he's been telling for years that you find out are not true at all. That war story that he's been telling on Stump Speech, not true. None of those elements were true. Now, either he didn't remember the elements of the story or he lied to make up those elements. Joe Biden would say that he was marching in the civil rights movement. That wasn't true. None of that was true. Joe Biden's been making stuff up. Either Joe Biden is losing it mentally, which is probably true, by the way. He can't remember dates. He can't remember things that happened. He keep calling Theresa May Margaret Thatcher, which is a little weird. And even from the standpoint of political acumen, meaning it's not just dates and figures. It's also this notion of Biden is a shadow of his former self. Look back at the debates in 2012. Look back at the debates in 2008. Joe Biden was on point. He was awesome. He was able to deal with Sarah Palin without making her look too bad. So there was a political acumen built into that process. And he ran rings around Paul Ryan. Look at this debate. Look at how he was taken apart by Kamala Harris, who was the very next week shown to be a paper tiger when she got taken apart by Tulsi Gabbard. Look at how he got taken apart by Cory Snow Puff Man Booker. Booker is like a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Soft. And yet, he was able to take Biden apart. I guess my point is, he is a shadow of his former self. Not only can't he remember dates and figures and names and places. He couldn't even remember Obama's name. He didn't even know where he was. Not only is all that flat fact absolutely true with videos to match, and a video comes out day after day after day after day after day attesting to such, or videos coming out with him kind of out of it, like losing his, not quite there, like not quite wrapped tight. Biden was asked about this. Biden's response was, look, I might not be able to remember stuff, but that doesn't stop me from governing. And I think Biden is clearly, the public disagrees with you, sir. Electability only goes so far. I asked this question once, I'd ask this question again. How long can a man go from stage to stage to stage, mumbling incoherently, forgetting names, facts, features, making stuff up in other occasions, and the public not notice? My argument here is that the public is beginning to notice that electability only goes so far. And the moment that you make that argument and lean into that argument of electability, you admit that these notions of policy and everything else washed by the wayside, and the only thing that you have that's keeping you afloat is this notion that people think you can beat Trump. I hate to tell you this. The moment that somebody else has polling like yours, which Sanders does, the moment that that person is not making those mistakes, Sanders is not. Nobody's telling Sanders he needs to take naps. Nobody's telling him that. Nobody's, tapping him on the shoulder saying, hey, Joe, I think you need to take a nap, man. You're not doing this too well. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's saying Jane Sanders doesn't love Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is not out there not knowing where Bernie Sanders is. This is a factor of Joe Biden. Because this is a factor of Joe Biden, and people start to notice this, the basic question becomes, well, wait a minute. What happens if this guy who can't remember facts and features, can't remember names or dates, doesn't remember Obama's name, even though he's running on Obama's record, and couldn't even remember where he was? Do I really want this guy on a debate stage? The same guy that got roughed up by Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. Do I want this guy dealing with Trump on a debate stage? What I'm telling you is Donald Trump is going to deride his mental capabilities. He's going to call him slow. He's going to call him sleepy. He's going to call him not mentally altogether there. And every gaffe that Joe Biden has ever made is going to be made into a campaign video where they hit him with relentlessly. You think people don't know about the Joe Biden gaffe stuff or the mental capacity stuff. By the end of that election, they would think Joe Biden is senile. And Joe Biden would have given them the footage to kind of make the point for him. A vote for Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. Mark my words. You thought the email scandal with Clinton was bad, where the email thing just kept coming up over and over and over and over and over again. Couldn't get away from it. Joe Biden's mental capabilities will be the number one issue that will dog him in that debate or that race with Trump. Just saying, mark my words. You can't go from stage to stage to stage like this and mess up that often and people not notice. Like, it just, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So I am giving fair warning, and I know people think he's electable, but again, just like the Russiagate stuff, I will ask you, I will beseech you, I will tenderly push you on this particular issue, that consider for the moment that I might just be right. That all of those people who thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, that it wasn't even going to be a contest, that she was going to run the table on Trump, they were wrong. All of those people who thought Trump was working with the Russians, they were wrong. They've been wrong in one item after the next. There is a point of view that some of the people on the Democratic Party are taking, and I'm pointing out to you that that point of view is not and has not been accurate. Joe Biden is not more electable, and Joe Biden will get bullied if Joe Biden gets into the general election. Mark my words. And this is not something that I want, by the way. If Donald Trump wins, oh my God. Because there's certain things that are going to have to take place. One, Democrats will not get the Senate. There's no situation where the president of the United States get put back in office, a Republican president, and for whatever reason, those voters turn around and put in a Democrat. Democrats or Republicans will retain the Senate. Democrats may likely lose the House. Understand what that means? House, Senate, and additional Supreme Court. Because RBG is a gangster, but she also has cancer right now. Meaning that if she passes, that is another Supreme Court seat that Trump will be able to install. I don't think you understand the clear and present danger that's associated with Donald Trump winning another election. Just be aware. make your choice. You know, like be very careful with the choice that you make, because there will be large consequences for that choice.
He's giving away the store.
He's giving away the store.
At the back door.
I'm telling you, man, to be very careful with that choice. Be very careful with that choice. You have an enthusiasm gap with Biden. That enthusiasm gap exists purely because people don't necessarily care about Biden per se. They just want him to beat Trump. They're so terrified of Trump that they're willing to give away the House. You are at an inflection point in history. At various stages in history, we, in this particular country, has had to take certain lifts. Whether that was slavery, whether that was a revolutionary war, whether that was civil rights, whether that was workers' rights, gay rights, etc., etc., etc. Somebody has always to take the lift in the particular opportunity. And we are at an inflection point where we have a situation where you have the chance to potentially get what you want as Democrats. Oftentimes, Democrats push away what they actually want and just settle for the corporate choice because they believe that that's all they can get. Well, that's shown to not be true. I mean, you have a situation where many of the policies that you want are popular, are mainstream policies, despite the fact they're being enunciated by a guy who calls himself a democratic socialist. You have the potential to get what you want. Biden's polling is exactly the same as Sanders' polling against Trump. And for what that's worth, at this exact same time right now, Clinton was beating Trump by double digits. So take that with a grain of salt. I guess I'm making the point to you that as opposed to going with what you are terrified of, you have the potential to vote for somebody who has a vision for the country, who's earnest, who tells you the truth when he's talking about these policies, whether you like it or not. That is something that is rare, and that is something that you haven't necessarily had before. You have somebody who says, I'm not going to take corporate cash in the general and in the primaries, meaning the person who's buying him, meaning 90% of the races are won by the side with the most cash. You have, for all intents and purposes, an oligarch. You have an outlier in the situation where somebody says, I'm not going to take that cash, meaning I am paid by you. You are the people who are supporting me. You are the people who are putting me in that office, not this other kind of dark money that we talk about. And the honest reality is, can you really curtail dark money if you're being powered by that same cash? Yeah, you have a chance. I mean, this is one of these cases where Sanders is trying to reinsert the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. And he is running in number 2. He is gaining on Biden. And not just gaining on Biden, the public that we thought was dormant, that didn't care about this stuff, all of a sudden does.
I see a good demonstration of your point. And the fact that the media is trying to bend reality. Go out and search for the Democratic polling over the last month and see if you don't find cases, as I did a few moments ago, where they'll say, wow, it's Bernie and Biden, and they have a picture of who Pocahontas.
Yeah, Warren. They're pushing Warren hard. I mean, CNN, MSNBC, these networks are pushing Warren extremely hard. Like, and the wild part is, there are times where Sanders would be like in number 2, and they would skip. It's like it got to the point where they were intentionally trying to just not say Sanders' name.
Yeah, and I love Warren, but I just think the press should do a better job of finding reality and presenting it to us. Otherwise, I would say everybody's on notice. The press is going to sell.
Oh, it's not about reality. No. Like, I mean, it's the Martin Luther King dilemma, right? The Martin Luther King Malcolm X dilemma. No. You have a situation where you have 2 people in a race. One guy has mental issues, and he is looking like he's going to flame out. I mean, they're telling him to take naps. You have a year before the next, before they even vote. And they're telling him to take naps now.
You mean 2019, okay.
I mean, I can show you a video where Biden looks like he can't even get the words out. Like, he's like, well, blah, 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 help.
First thing in the morning, yeah.
Yeah, right. I know, right? They got him at 2 in the evening. It's like...
Well, it wasn't. It was 3 in the afternoon.
My point to them was he should have wrote Obama's name on his hand. And whoever didn't tell him to do that should be fired. Like, you need to make an example of somebody. It's like
Sarah,
right on your hand. Oh, Barack Obama. He just be like, Barack Obama, my boss, Barack Obama, and just write all that stuff down on his hand. I was married on this particular date. I am in Vermont. I am in New Hampshire. Like, all that stuff. He could just have it on his arm, look like he's tatted up, like he's in a gang or something. Somebody should have been fired in order to make an example. But It's wild. They are pushing Warren. But it's the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King dilemma. It's you have two people. One is more radical than the other, meaning Sanders is not, he's not even taking cash. Meaning a Democratic Party that is essentially run by that corporate cash, run by all of the money that they are have in their coffers and all this other stuff. And these guys, for the most part, have Warren under their thumb. In fact, many articles have come out where Warren is essentially telling the Democratic Party, look, I'm not trying to have a political revolution. Things, I just want things to be a little further to the left. Don't worry about it. You can trust in me, et cetera, because her point is clear. When the superdelegates come, if there's a situation where they go to the second round, which they can force, then every superdelegate comes back into play. There was this nonsense that the superdelegates didn't apply. And I was like, that's nonsense. You can look back at my old videos. I was like, oh, this is a scam. And people are running around as if there was something won in this process. They're pushing her. They know that Sanders is unruly, meaning they have no idea what he is. In their mind,
he has beliefs.
Well, he has beliefs.
He's not for sale.
And he's not a real Democrat. He's calling for a political revolution, and every policy that he's been putting out has been transformative in whatever sector he's talking about.
Marianne Williamson does the same thing.
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
Marianne Williamson, yes, she does. She speaks her mind.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is, Warren is under the thumb of the party. Like at Standing Rock, she didn't come off for Standing Rock. She waited until Obama came out for Standing Rock, and then she came on. A woman who called herself a Native American, self-identified.
Well, it's not really. It's sort of confusion. Anyway.
I grew up. My grandfather was Cherokee. Literally, my grandfather was Cherokee. And it wasn't 20 generations. He was I could look at him. He was like a quarter of Cherokee.
Yeah, I'm a quarter, sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, not a quarter. It's like an eighth or something. Well, whatever it is.
Anyway,
but I guess my point is, you could see it. There wasn't a doubt. I never self-identified as Cherokee. I never self-identified as Native American. I only ever identified as black because that's how I grew up and so forth. Mm-hmm. I would have to believe that Warren grew up in a way where she literally self-identified as Native American without having those things in her face and just being told that.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of a family thing. We had the same thing in my family. Dad used to say, so-and-so had high cheekbones. She was... Yeah. That's our Indian genes,
But did you self-identify as Native American after that?
Well, no. We were proud of the idea that we were connected to the local indigenous populations, but I never bothered to check it out.
It's a little strange. I mean, even her Harvard review thing has her as a Native American, at which point Harvard is using and saying, hey, we have a mixed class this year. We have a first Native American. It's like, who's that? Oh, Elizabeth Warren? Like, this stuff is a little weird. I don't ding her for this, talking about, because I do give a benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, maybe the family stuff. I got to be honest, I am more cynical in this, and I think she probably thought she was going to get some advantage, whether she got an advantage or not. It's more so, what did you think going into this process when you were getting into school? Did you think you would get some advantage in getting into the school by saying you were a Native American? Because Harvard certainly started using that as a poster child for that stuff.
Yeah.
So fair enough. So I'm not going to ding her too much on that. But not supporting Sanders. How do you not support Sanders and then turn around and ask for people to support you? I don't quite get that. And to not support her for political reasons. In 2013, Elizabeth Warren signed a secret letter along with many other women in Senate to Hillary Clinton. They didn't expose this. And what Warren, every time asked, just lied about it after the fact, saying, well, I thought it was a good primary, et cetera, et cetera. The rigged it, didn't rig it. Where she goes on television saying, yes, they rigged it. And then the very next day after the party gets there, said they didn't rig it. I don't trust her. And there are legitimate reasons to not trust her, even the primary thing. Right now, Elizabeth Warren is saying, I'm not going to take money in the primary. And then she turns around and says, however, I will take it in the general. Now, this makes zero sense. But the public who likes her and identifies her just says, oh yeah, that makes all the sense in the world that she's not going to take it. She's building a grassroots movement. As if you can't take, corporate cash and build a grassroots movement. You can do both. In fact, you probably can build it faster if you did take corporate cash because you'll have more money to work with. But no. So it doesn't really make sense. Her reasoning for doing that has everything to do with wanting to be able to stand beside Sanders and say, him and I aren't taking corporate cash. The catch here is, and the difference here is, you will be taking it once you get out of the election. You will be taking all the money that you can get your hands on. As you say, you're not unilaterally disarming. That makes zero sense. And if people think for themselves for the moment, ask yourself, why on earth is she not taking money in the primary, but she is taking it in the general? Just ask yourself why. What would be the reason for somebody to do that? And it becomes quite plain, pretty straightforward, pretty quickly. Well, they know that money hurt Hillary Clinton in the last election. And because they know money hurt Hillary Clinton in the last election, when Sanders could essentially deride his political opponent and create difference between the two, many of the other candidates in this race decided not to take cash in that way. However, Warren has come out saying, I will take it in the general. I'm just making the point that it makes zero sense other than the political optics or the gimmick of trying to get out of the primaries while standing beside the opponent. And you must understand the problem with this. If you have a primary where people say they don't want people taking corporate cash, clearly they don't want that, because clearly many of the political people say, okay, we're not going to do it. If they could do it, they would. Warren, in his case, says, okay, I can't be in the primary and win this primary doing this. However, once I get out of the primary, the people would have nowhere else to go and they will be stuck with me. Meaning, they're not going to penalize me for taking corporate cash when I'm running against Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a menace and he's going to eat babies and kick puppies. So at the very least, they're going to be happy with me. Yeah, he already does. So it's like, it's a gimmick. It's a trick. You're being scammed. I'm sorry. And I know people who like Warren hates when I say that, but you are literally being scammed. She is a political con artist in this particular sense. She is trying to find a gimmick and find to give you an excuse to allow her to not take cash in the primary, and then you be stuck with her in the general. Why on earth do you want that? And beyond that, why do you think that a candidate who's doing the exact same thing that every other candidate has done in regards to taking corporate cash is somehow going to give you a different result? She is not. I don't doubt that she may be a little bit to the left. But what I do know is that between the two, she is far more controllable, and she is not looking for any kind of real structural change. She is just looking for, a few programs here or there that's not necessarily going to structurally change the system in a way that Sanders would. Meaning Sanders is an existential threat to the system in the way that the two parties have arranged it. And they know it. They know it, which is why they're pushing Warren so hard.
Yeah, he's an out of control dude.
No,
like, it seems like the entirety of the, I can't see the electorate, but the elected candidates seem to be deathly afraid of democracy. There's an abject fear of democracy.
They're afraid of it when it's going to kick them out of office, yeah.
Well, there's something about people, what they want and what politicians are doing or giving to themselves that violates, I think, and they realize the population at large would probably be very angry with them. Like, you can name many instances why where the government doesn't talk about things that are very essential.
Yes.
And I think this is probably a good case in point. There's $1 trillion riding on this election. It's an influence auction.
It is.
And exactly who gets what. Democracy used to be based on people. And that would be my point. I'm sorry. I'm getting carried away here.
You're fine.
But it's really essential. If we could find democracy again, we might have a chance. With these hucksters, we don't have a chance of finding a real society.
That's true. I mean, yeah, that is true. And they are hucksters. And you do have a political system that runs on cash. I mean, the moment that you have a judicial system that makes a ruling that says cash equals speech, then corruption is just ingrained in that. Like, that's so perverse. Like this notion that a corporation is a person. If a corporation held the door open for you, they'll hold their hand out for a nickel. So, let's be very clear that corporations are not human beings, nor should that ever have been put into law, nor is speech the exact same. I mean, money is a property. It's an asset. It's not equivalent to speech. That's nonsense.
It's for people who don't believe in anything spiritual. Money is a good equivalent, I guess.
It's a good equivalent because it gives you a feedback mechanism in your current society, meaning in physical matter reality, this allows me to buy things and access things and, in
Diversions.
my... Right. In my environment and everything else. And we have this weird thing in our system where cash is both for sustenance and status. And so as opposed to it being for just sustenance, meaning people can buy the things that they need and everything else, it also becomes a status symbol because being poor means you don't have your needs met, and having a ton of it means you can have all sorts of your needs met. I agree with you, but democracy is hard, only in the sense that you have certain people with me. Like, for example, democracy and capitalism always are in conflict with one another. I know some right-wingers often like to use this notion that democracy and capitalism are go hand in hand. Nonsense. The last thing that a capitalist wants is a democracy. Because understand what that means. A democracy is going into play and says, you know what? Getting 95% of the wealth to the top 1% is just obscene, and we need to take a democratic choice to prevent a system like that from allowing it to do that. Or where you said the skew in the way that the top 1% has been able to get aggrandize themselves is obscene, and we need to take a democratic choice to change how that happens. Any democratic choice on that front curtails revenue of a top 1%. And the last thing the top 1% wants is a curtailing of their revenue. Democracy always runs into conflict with capitalism. I mean, because think of it in the sense of a corporation. A corporation is a totalitarian system. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's a little state of sorts that's insular unto itself, for the most part, has somebody at the head that is essentially a king. And the people who are at the top, for the most part, tell everybody else, thousands of people sometimes, what they should do, how they should work, how long they should work, how much they're going to get paid. And essentially, those people have little to no agency in the process, only to be automatons. Democracy is something different. A democracy, or a workplace democracy, would have those people being engaged in the process of determining how they do their jobs, how much they get paid. Those people, if they were running their own company, would never ship their company or their job overseas, because nobody is going to ever give up their job.
Yeah.
Democracy is different.
Yes.
Capitalism is not a big fan of democracy. I mean, think about it. Think of all the policy choices. They gave the top 1% trillions of dollars in this tax cut. Meaning Trump says he's not going to raise or lower his taxes, and he does the opposite of that, having a grotesque tax cut that even goes beyond Bush. And this is at a time when income inequality is at its worst ever, even going beyond the Great Depression. Now, a top 1%, people who 90% of which were the side, again, with the most cash gets in office. So all of these people, for the most part, are organized around the needs of the top 1%, because those are the people who are given the money to get in office. You have an oligarchy. Nonsense. This is not democracy. I guess my point is, those people make certain political choices, and those political choices are set in order to give themselves more. When Mitch McConnell passes that tax cut, and then the person who gets that tax cut give Mitch McConnell a kickback in the tunes of millions of dollars in a super PAC, well, the circuit is complete. Essentially, the person gets their cash, they turn around and give that cash to political leaders who turn around and give them more cash in tax cuts. Now, and people are like, I don't understand why the government doesn't do what we wanted to do. Because of that. And they're not insane for doing this. If your job, if 90% of the revenue of the people who get elected are the side with the most cash, then it makes all the sense in the world for that particular politician to essentially organize itself around people with means, because those are the people who are giving them cash, and those are the people that matter, because those are the people that they're going to get elected by if they can get the most money. They have a 9 out of 10 chance of winning if they can get the most money, meaning they are beseeching the wealth. The wealthy has essentially created a system whereby they have political control despite this notion of being a democratic system. It's running in parallel with a capitalistic system. But that said, democracy supposedly should win out. And over time, we've had movements, and those movements have changed in regards to, be it Teddy Roosevelt and the way that he went after, trust buster, be it FDR. There have been times where there's been a change based on movements. So it's, yes, democracy, but democracy is not without a large mass and upswell of human beings that are forcing that through and making that work. I agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Right.
So the Work FM, the Work 93.9, WRWK 93.9 FM. Guys, I want to give a heads up on some of the other channels that are on the station, channels that you might like in addition to this one. Citizens Voices with Jay at 2 p.m. on Sunday, and The Frequency of Hope with Stephanie. She was just here a few minutes ago. She could have came on and said hi. The Progressive Soapbox on Tuesday. I'm the person you're listening to right now. On Wednesday, Her Human Equal Rights with Leslie at 7 p.m.
Every other Wednesday.
Oh, every other Wednesday. I'm sorry. On Thursday, Richmond Business Babes with Lisa. That happens at 11 a.m. And Self-Care Activists. That's the show that you enjoy. Ooh. And then who's the person who runs that one?
Mary Boris.
Mary Boris.
The one and only Mary Boris.
And on Friday, Critiques for the Culture. And that takes place on 7 p.m. on Friday.
A very interesting show.
Is it? That's the show that critiques culture, right?
Yes, culture, popular culture, current culture. These two ladies who are very good friends and very honest with each other talk about items that are clearly in the media representing various topics that they, stereotypes that they themselves may animate. But they really talk about it very broadly. They're not just talking about from the feminine perspective, but the entire culture and how well it serves to inform us. It's kind of a I guess my way of looking at it is that the media attempts to tell us something about ourselves theoretically, and so when you have a piece of information offered to us in the way of a movie, ideally would have something to do with us.
Yes.
And
Well, it would be weird if it didn't. I mean, because it's coming from a person.
Well, yeah, I guess it's sort of almost definitional, but my idea was that they critique how well they do discuss that area of life.
Yeah.
And they do a very thorough, intelligent, non-bombastic, and kind of fun discussion. It's like hanging out in a coffee shop and the people next table are talking about something. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think I'll buy another cup of coffee. Hey, bring me another glass of wine. Just stick around because they're talking about stuff you wouldn't necessarily go seek out. But wow, thanks for sharing that, folks.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Hey, by the way, we borrow that show, or we get that show from WRIR, our sort of quasi-sister station up in Richmond proper.
Very cool.
Give a shout out to them. Yeah.
So I also want to give a shout out to Thrifty Quaker, located in Midlothian Station Shopping Center at the corner of Midlothian Turnpike and Cofield Road. The Thrifty Quaker sells donated items to support the work of 12 varying, mostly local charities each year. This month, Thrifty Quaker supports the Carol Adams Foundation, whose mission is to provide emergency assistance to women, men, and children who are victims of domestic violence. Also, I just want to point out that WRWK is a volunteer-run independent public radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you great, awesome programming. It takes roughly $60 a day to keep us on the air. You can ensure the life of this station by making a donation or volunteering.
Mention those people who donated in the last couple of weeks.
So support for WRWK is provided, and listeners like you, thank you. Morton, Lee, Karen, Leslie, Lisa, Mark, Stephanie, Ron, Stephen, Josh, Kristen, Richard, and Jamal. With R missing. I'm going to add that R right now. That's okay.
Confuse people.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yes, absolutely. I have August 31st, 2019. I like that because that's my birthday.
Happy birthday.
I've become a 42-year-old man.
42.
Yeah, it doesn't look it. I look, black don't crack and all that good stuff. Yeah, black don't crack. And so it's like you're going to be 80 and looking like you're 40. But no, it's funny. The men in my family, for the most part, stay young looking. So it's one of those, it's a benefit. So, at 30, people think, what, you're in your 30s? Like, no. I'm long past 30. Haven't been 30 in a very long time. Speaking about democracy, let's talk about democracy. Yes. Democracy is somewhat of an important thing. And when we're talking about government technically isn't real. I mean, any more than money is real, or any of these lines that we call our borders and everything else. Those things are most like thought things, but those aren't real things. They're kind of like icons that we organize ourselves around. That makes it extremely important from the standpoint of people acknowledging, or at the very least have a certain degree of belief that the democratic process is legit. Meaning, because the fact of the matter is, again, the government is one of those things that it's in your head, not necessarily in the outer world. If you put all the laws into a book and an alien civilization picked up that book, the book will be real, the lettering will be real, the ink will be real, but the laws, they would have no idea what they are. Those things exist entirely in your head. Interestingly enough, it's the faculty of human beings to use our imaginations, to essentially make stuff up. That faculty seems like it's like a wasted faculty, but if you really think about it, that faculty is necessary for you to have any civilization beyond just a few people. Think about the way you organize yourself. You have 300 million people, many of which you don't know. All of which, seriously, the majority of which, right, that's putting it mildly. And yet, all of you accrue around the notion of one government. Again, the government isn't real. You have all of these myths and everything else that we organize ourselves around, chop down the cherry tree, we know this stuff, eating crabs in Virginia. If you're living in Virginia, despite me not knowing these people, these are kind of cultural stuff that goes along with it. We have our cultural traditions, we have the flag, all that stuff. But that stuff becomes important because those things are just organizing principles by which people organize themselves around. The stick-to-itiveness of that, however, to some degree depends on whether or not people believe that process is fair and honest, meaning a notion of democratic justice or fairness. Meaning, when you have a system where there's an exchange of power, you don't have this thing where there's a war between two sides because one side wants to take power from the other side. In our system, you have under one government with this notion that the government of the United States is the highest part, and we need to at the very least be together on that particular part, despite the political back and forth that we may have. You have Republicans and you have Democrats, and these guys fight like cats and dogs in order to figure out who's going to be who. But it is important, regardless of how they fight, however, that the people in the country believes that the process is fair. Because if they don't believe the process is fair, then any notion of legitimacy goes out the window. All notions of legitimacy of a particular government is done by the people who are in that government. And whatever process you use for those people to make a determination on who's going to be in charge, that process needs to be understood by the majority of the people or the bulk of the people that are participating to be fair. Otherwise, you have something else. You don't have a democratic order. You have something else. And the moment that you have people that lose any sorts of faith and belief in that system, you have much greater problems because now this notion of trying to find who's in charge and leadership becomes contested as opposed to an orderly process. There's a reason why you have this kind of pomp and pageantry that goes on where one leader will call the other person and tell them, okay, I lost, you beat me, I'm sorry. And it was such a big deal when Hillary Clinton called Trump that first night because, oh my God, is she going to see what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. They like the orderly process because at the very least, it keeps the country from going into this kind of constitutional crisis, or at the very least keeps people from losing it, thinking that this is unfair and I don't have to pay attention to your laws because nobody voted you in. And if you look at other countries around the globe, you can see how that looks when one side doesn't accept the election result of another side. It is chaos. There are riots. There's conflict. I'm saying in our country, it behooves us to ensure that the process is fair. The Democratic Party, and I've said this before, has taken extraordinary measures that is literally an assault on the democratic process itself. This goes beyond attacking elements within the party, meaning us having a debate and you winning that particular debate. To be fair, they're not doing this for no reason, but it still doesn't necessarily justify their actions. When AOC gets in office, there were several Democrats, meaning or groups that work in the Democratic Party, Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, and many of these groups, especially led by AOC when she got in office as the figurehead of this, said, we need to primary some folks. I want Medicare for all. I want expansion of Social Security. I want expansion of college. And fact of the matter is we have a bunch of dinosaurs that will never allow that to come to pass, which means that in order for us to get the policies that we want, that we push for, that we told our constituents that we're going to push for, we need to primary some folks. Now, the Democratic Party's reaction was, we don't want you primary some folks, nor do we want any additional people like you in our constituency. And what they did was they took the extraordinary step in the House of Representatives to say that if any consultant assist any progressive to try to take down an incumbent, they will be blacklisted. Now understand what this means. Consultants, for the most part, live off of the contracts they may get with the DNC. And this is a life or death thing from the standpoint of their business. Meaning that any lefty who wants to try to get in office that would like to get support from somebody who's an experienced consultant, because again, if I tried to run in a race, I would have no idea how to start that process. Having an experienced consultant is a big deal. What the Democratic Party has said, if you try to help these lefties get in office, we're not going to help you. We are going to blacklist you from any services associated with the Democratic Party. Help them at your leisure. Which means that lefties, for the most part, weren't getting assistance from people who were competent in regards to running campaigns. This was something the Democratic Party did as somewhat of a nuclear option to try to stop lefties, A, from getting in the office, but B, from taking down incumbent dinosaurs. The Senate has started to do the same. And the Senate goes further. The Senate makes it worse. So not only is the Senate Democratic Party, or the, DS, Democratic Senate Committee, or something to that effect, but not only are they taking the extraordinary step of saying, if you assist any lefty from getting in office and taking down an incumbent, we will blacklist you. They're going further and saying, if you get a lefty in office at all, you're blacklisted. This goes further than the House's grotesque policy position that these guys are taking. Now, understand what this means. This is the Democratic Party literally putting their thumb on a scale in various races across the country. In various districts and locales, you have various people who decide to cobble themselves together, their money together, and maybe they decide to have a campaign because there's some issue that affects them and greatly bothers them in whatever district they find themselves. Or for that matter, if it's the Senate, whatever state they find themselves. And based on that campaign, they go out and they try to get votes and support and everything else, and they run, and they win or lose. But that's a tether to that particular region once they get into Congress. Based on what the Democratic Party is doing, they are literally preventing lefties from even getting into the contest by sucking out any level of support that they may get in trying to run their races. Meaning, no more AOCs, no more Ilhan Omars, no more of these people. None of these people would have gotten into the race or gotten into office if this policy was enacted during the time that they were running, which is the point, to prevent any of these rascally progressives from getting in office and try to drain away any notion of support for these particular policies. Why on earth, honestly, why would I vote Democrat under that circumstance?
Because you were in despair and there was nothing else you could do?
No, not that much despair. This is the democratic process thing. This is kind of like, if you cheat my guy, you're not getting my support. It's a principle thing. If you are literally going through the process of preventing people who I might want to vote for, it's one thing if I lose. Like if my guy gets up there, my guy just loses the contest, and fair enough, etc. You have at the very least a point of saying, look, your guy lost. You can support my guy now because at the very least, you know your guy lost and this district chose him. Even if there were advantages against my guy, at the very least, my guy lost fair and square, fair enough. But that's not where we are. Where we are is a Democratic Party that is openly trying to even stop these guys from getting in the race and is putting their thumb on the scale all throughout the United States. This notion of vote blue no matter who in a context like this becomes meaningless and nonsensical. There is no lefty that should vote for a Democrat under these terms. Am I wrong? I mean, well, be honest. Give me a point of view.
Think, honestly, when you think of the amount of destruction that a sociopath in the office of the presidency could cause, I think voting Democrat is probably a lesser evil than putting them into that position. Not that I'm saying anybody we know might be in that position,
yeah.
But I think if that's what it was against, I would have to say Joe Stein next time maybe. But this time I have to vote blue because there was nothing else that's reasonably attempting to be sane.
Yeah.
No, I think the DCC is corrupt. I tell them that every time they send me a fundraising letter. But at the same time, I think they can be fixed. Not because they're not horrible, because they haven't done disgusting things and plan to do it now. In fact, are doing it now. In fact, they probably are run by the Kochs. I think it's really all we have. I'm desperate not to have any more Jill Stein or stay home elections. We cannot have that. People have to participate in huge numbers. If you go right in Mickey Mouse, I would go right in Mickey Mouse, but I would say just ahead of Mickey Mouse, I would consider writing in whoever in the heck is blue, because whoever in the heck is red seems to be trying to sell us. Maybe it's already happened. Whoops. Maybe it's already happened.
But what does that mean though in real terms? I mean, ultimately that means that you've always in a political position where you're stuck voting for the Democrat regardless of what the Democrat does, and even with the Democrat stopping people who you would want to vote for. Meaning the goal of it is to prevent you from ever getting your particular political choice even out as a choice. Why would you support that? I don't understand that.
In local elections, I think you have a choice, but in the larger scale elections, it is not democracy. It's not democracy at all. It's a business.
Yes.
It's purely a business.
Then why get involved? I guess I'm saying if there is no consequence for bad behavior.
The consequence sits in a Oval Office right now. That's the consequence.
Well, that's one consequence. But I'm talking about right now, the Democratic Party is running an assault on
Yes.
progressive challengers
Yes.
all throughout the United States where they're
Yes.
putting their thumb on the scale.
Yeah.
And if indeed
Himmler.
they're stopping,
No. Himmler rolled over his grave and said, "Yay, go for it, boys."
if there are people who I might want in a district, and maybe the district themselves want it, and you know that the Democratic Party is putting their thumb on the scale to prevent those people from coming into the political process, why should you vote Democrat and allow that particular thing to take place? Because ultimately what you get is a party that can essentially repeat the process, and you never get your
Yeah,
candidates
exactly.
even aired.
Right? They obviously fear democracy worse than their enemy.
Yes, then they should lose.
I agree, they should lose. However, there are consequences to losing.
That's true.
It's a business. It's no longer a democracy. It's a business. And you have to find, wherever you can find ways to push power to the least irrational and least insane people, you have to support them. I hate to say it. I sound like a cynic. I'm not a cynic at all.
Oh, no, I don't think
I
you're
love
cynical at all. In fact, I don't think you're cynical enough. I would argue let it burn. If the Democratic Party is going to take actions where they are literally trying to stop various candidates from getting into the race because they don't want that type in Congress, or they're trying to undermine it.
Yeah.
Russia might have been taking him over, but this is Chuck Schumer
I know.
who's taking him over, and this is Nancy Pelosi. Like, I guess I'm making a point that the Democratic Party can't. This is the same party that went into court and said we can lie when we want to lie.
I know.
We're a corporation.
I was shamed by that.
Yes, we can lie when we want to lie. We can steal when we want to steal. We're a corporation. We're a business. And this is a fraud lawsuit where they're arguing that, telling people that, hey, this is earnest. Well, you're not being cheated. This is a completely fair process. It is impartial, et cetera, and knowingly taking money from people in that process. Meaning,
On that basis,
if
yeah.
I am giving Sanders, let's say $100, I'm giving him $100 thinking that the process is fair. And if the process is not fair, nobody in their right mind will give Sanders $100 because nobody's going to throw their money in the toilet for a process they know is not fair. The Democratic Party lied through their teeth, continuously lied. And they went through essentially saying fair, honest, impartial, et cetera. And then WikiLeaks comes out. Donna Brazile comes out. I could read to you what Donna Brazile said. It is damning. And she makes the... Donna Brazile wrote a piece in Politico when she was hawking her book. And Donna Brazile essentially said, I lit a candle that night when I started reading. She starts it off that way. And she goes into reading this, making this point of saying the Hillary Clinton camp essentially had complete control of the political apparatus. Meaning, Hillary had all of the money being rerouted to to New York. And in addition to having the money rerouted to New York, so she was hitting Sanders saying, oh, he's not giving any money to the state parties. Do you realize the money that Clinton was getting, she was laundering money with 1% going to the state parties. That's it. The money that Hillary Clinton was raising, that she was saying she was raising for the parties, got all redirected back to New York with the exception of 1%. She had complete control over the political apparatus. Donna Brazile writes in her thing saying, yeah, the money was being laundered back, and Debbie gave Hillary Clinton complete control of the political... Deborah Wasserman-Schultz, who Donna Brazile covering saying, oh, she was a bad manager. Nonsense. She was corrupt. She used to work with Clinton in one of the other campaigns. So the person who was running Clinton's old campaign just so happened was head of the DNC and gave control of the DNC over to Clinton while Clinton was running in the race. Now, they tell me that this is not cheating. I don't understand that process. In which case is there an impartial process where Michael Jordan owns the referees, Michael Jordan owns the building, and Michael Jordan is playing in the game. Michael Jordan come out and say, all right, that was a fair game.
And it's funny because Trump took on that game and played it.
Yes, he did.
Better than Hillary.
Because the difference is, one, Democrats are okay with cheating within the context of their own party. But against Republicans, for whatever reason, they don't do as well. That's what it is. Now, they're more nefarious in the sense of once Trump got elected, that, the intelligence service is going after Trump and Comey and the Trump-Russia stuff and attacking this war of attrition that took place, kind of like a repeat of Bill Clinton, with the exception of it being Trump instead. The Whitewater investigations that pulls out the Monica Lewinsky blowjob and that type of stuff.
Yeah, except it was a little more, well, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's like flipped. It almost in an inverse. But it's I guess my point is, that party, after they cheated Sanders, continuously lied.
Yeah,
and they
to this
say,
day.
we're united, nothing ever happened, we're united. And Tom Perez, lying, comes out and says, no, there wasn't really cheating, there was appearance of impropriety. There was an appearance of non-trust. There was appearance of all this other nonsense. No, they cheated, and they don't want to own up to the fact that they cheated.
I'm curious, perhaps you know, How did he get elected, and how did the current head of the DNC get elected?
Tom Perez was working with, ran in a leadership race. He was going against Keith Ellison and a few other people. Keith Ellison was one of the leaders in that race. Obama apparently was making calls to try to find a dark horse to get into the race because they didn't want Keith Ellison to take it because they thought he was too close to Sanders. Tom Perez gets into the race, and in some weird shenanigans that's taken place, Tom Perez ends up getting it in a secret ballot, which again is forbade under DNC law. And the people were like they didn't realize that they were being had even while they were at the DNC as the DNC was having them. Tom Perez gets in office and he immediately curtails some of the power of Sanders members and then say, okay, we're going to have a unity thing. We're united. We're going to have a unity reform commission. The reform part started to drop away, and then it just became a unity commission. This notion that 5 million people left the party and their goal was to try to get these people and sucker these people back into the party. My thing is very basic. A party that lied and cheated in 2016, and you can make an argument that cheating is what lost them that election. Potentially.
For me, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things. It's one of many. But then to lie about it flagrantly, continuously after that, and then to move into whether you make the argument that Sanders was going to lose anyway is a separate argument than whether or not it was an impartial process and whether or not they were cheating. Those are different. And then for, to lie continuously afterwards as if nobody is going to, be the wiser of this. And then for stuff like this to take place, where it's like, not only did you cheat in 2016, in a period where you're saying we're united, you're still cheating. Yep. You're still cheating.
And the same people are making the same decisions. So is that Perez or somebody over him doing that?
This is Chuck Schumer, believe it or not.
He's calling him out.
No, Chuck Schumer's not calling anybody out. Chuck Schumer is working with the Senate, Democratic Senate Committee in order to attack the various people in the states that are trying to get progressives elected. That's the Democratic Party doing that. That's the DCCC and the DS, I guess, CC. Both of these groups. The Senate is even more onerous because for them, they're even going after people who are trying to take down Republicans. They just don't want progressives in at all.
Oh, really? Wow.
So I hope you get my point. These guys are flush with cash. Yeah. And in a situation where these guys said they could cheat when they want to cheat, clearly they haven't learned their lesson. They never own up to the fact that they were cheating in the last election. And now you have this where they're still taking heavy-handed actions in order to prevent people who I may actually like and who the district may actually like from even getting a fair hearing.
The lesson they learned was that if you lie, cheat, and steal and get rich, you should do it again.
Look, my thing is, if they can succeed off of doing this, then they would do it again. And despite what is at stake, they should lose. If this system needs to burn to the ground for the Democratic Party to realize that you should not be monkeying around with the system to try to hold back the night, it's not their jobs to do this. They're in that job to be a servant of the particular government of sorts, meaning they're driving the bus. They don't own the bus. They're just there for a period of time.
I think they have a misunderstanding about their job.
That is true, and they need to be thrown out. And honestly, if that means that they need to lose to the Republic, I have a picture in my room of Q, the one that was in Star Trek, Delancey. Yeah, I think his name, Delancey. Q is one of my favorite characters in Star Trek. And when I got the opportunity to meet him at GalaxyCon, shook his hand. He's like, you're one of my favorite characters, man. Your character's awesome. And he says, so what do you do? I said, I'm a commentator. I do political analysis. He says, I said, I have a channel. He says, he got close. He says, are you telling people to vote? I said, and it killed me to say this because I love the character. I said, it depends on what the Democratic Party does and who they put up. And his thing was, okay, we need to vote to get Trump out. Again, I repeat it depends on what the Democratic Party does. Because I'm one of those people that look at this and say, look, either it's a democracy or it's not. And if what these guys are doing is going beyond the pale in regards to try to stop a district or an area from electing members that may be in their best interest because their ideological differences, meaning the Democratic Party is trying to prevent a change
democracy.
But they're trying to prevent a hegemonic change, meaning there's a challenge to the leadership within the context of the party itself.
Yeah.
And what people want, meaning Sanders, because at this point the question becomes, do you agree with Sanders or not? And so these guys are trying to hold back the night and prevent the reinstalling of the party. If Sanders gets elected, he's going to need people to get elected with him. Their goal is to stop that. So even from the standpoint of stopping Sanders, maybe the secondary plot of trying to stop Sanders is Elizabeth Warren, meaning if you could split the vote, she can get that vote tally and get in office, but also to prevent numbers, because Sanders would need numbers to accomplish any objectives that he wants. There's no way Medicare for All gets passed without having people who are willing to pass Medicare for All. And even if Sanders gets in, if they have a bunch of dinosaurs in, there is no way going to budge on that. Pelosi is not bringing up Medicare for All. Now there's Chuck Schumer, meaning Sanders would have to literally run against the party itself to get anything accomplished. They need to lose. Like, I don't say this lightly, so don't misunderstand me. And I don't say this because I want Trump in office and none of that stuff. But come on. Like, you have a situation where the party is literally going after lefties to blackball and to blacklist people who assist lefties in trying to get elected. Lefties who may actually be wanted by their particular district. AOC's district wanted her. Under their model, she doesn't exist.
Democracy, yeah.
She doesn't exist. If the Democratic Party needs to lose in order to get through their heads that you should not cheat because they didn't learn the lesson the first time around, then they need...
We've been losing the lesson for... I mean, forget Obama, forget Bill. We've been losing the lesson for 30 years.
We have been. I mean, but in this kind of the lesson is the Democratic Party's lesson. I mean, look, I always call lefties the politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party. Because, you know, the you have nowhere else to go, that type of argument, we can do whatever we want to, you have nowhere else to go, we can do it. Like, if Hillary Clinton won in 2016, and she, let's say, got rid of Social Security, privatized Social Security, something lefties just bristle at, and she, you know, cut something else, I don't know, or she went to war in Syria. Again, right. She goes further, like she puts a missile defense shield in Syria. Like, these are things that lefties hate, and she gives us onerous tax cut. In 2020, when she's up again, the argument that they're going to use is, well, you can't let Republicans win, right? Meaning, it doesn't matter what she does. It doesn't matter what the Democrat does. That argument essentially rests on this notion that Republicans are going to be so onerous. And people look at this purely within the context of one election, not within the context of 20 years, where you could see a slide further and further and further to the right with this nonsense argument of, well, I mean, I understand that she privatized Social Security. I understand that she did this. I understand she was essentially a Republican, but you can't let the Republican win. Is that really the argument that lefties should fall on? You have Trump in office right now already. What else are you scared of? Honestly.
Trump is he's a choir boy compared to the people he runs with.
That is true. The Boltons of the world, the Haspels of the world, those people are horrible. I guess I'm making a slightly different point. At some point, the left has to grow a spine. And if you're always put in the position of either you support this hack that you don't want to support, or you get the Republican, and that happens year after year after year after year with this notion of any level of vision. I mean, John F. Kennedy at one point said, we're going to the moon. Like, that level of vision. They didn't even know how to go. They didn't even know how to do it. No. Like, it took them like a decade to figure out. They were behind. But they figured out how to do it once they prioritized that particular vision, and they did it. That's vision. What do we have now? We have a bunch of people saying, you know, Delaney paying $20 million of his own money to say we can't have nice things. This is the Democratic Party. This is why I attack this party, because this party, for the most part, goes against the objectives that I myself want to see espoused in the world, and that most of the public wants to see espoused.
It's the last shred of democracy we have. Yeah.
It is, but that last shred of democracy sometimes boils down to people saying no. No, just no, I'm not accepting. Like, that shouldn't be accepted under any circumstance.
Yeah, I quite agree.
That should not, but you just said you were willing to accept it.
When I'm in the ballot box, if I have two choices, I know what my choice will be.
Even though you know that you are gamed, and that in perpetuity, you could continuously be gamed using the same motif.
Well, I think you know the thing that's going to end the game is that the game hits a wall because you can't lie about reality forever and get away with it. Eventually, reality, like right now, we have a hurricane coming up the eastern shore. Now, that hurricane parks over D.C. and sits there for a couple of hours, and of course, Trump in his wisdom decides to nuke it. Brilliant man. We'll take care of all the troubles at one time. That guy is so brilliant. We should have hired two like him, you know?
Oh, God. Yeah, that's funny. I heard him say that. I was like, God, God, he's stupid. You know, he says stuff sometimes. He got on TV and started attacking Fox News. Did you see this?
Yes, I heard.
He got mad. I think I even have the video. And the funny part about that is, to some degree, it's kind of true.
Yeah.
Like Trump, in his mind, he's like, MSNBC is Democrats' propaganda outlet. Fox is supposed to be my propaganda outlet. What's with these polls? Like, why are these polls so bad? As if they have complete control over the polls. He's like, why didn't you game the polls? I love that. I love the honesty in that. Like, why don't you just lie about the polls? Why are you giving these bad polls?
He read the Hitler's all work, and they beat people up that got in the way, and if they destroyed the news by making it true, they just got rid of them.
They just got rid
Trump
of
doesn't have quite that much control. He didn't have a desperate population like Hitler had. A totally desperate population.
Yeah.
They were running 10,000% inflation every month. He had a desperate population. What Trump has is a bunch of really sad, lonely, unloved people who will grab at anything to have some power. And I understand where that came from.
Yeah.
And no doubt Hillary had a role in that. And they're slowly, I think, probably being peeled off because they realize the man is really not in control of himself or anything else.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's like, I couldn't imagine having two senile people on that debate stage going at each other.
Yeah, that would be funny.
It would be massively entertaining.
Entertaining,
but
yeah.
sad at the same time.
It's a statement about us,
It is.
Our country has denied itself for so long, and even now we're pretending that we're Christian. We're pretending that we don't hate black. We're pretending that we don't, hate minorities. We have all these pretenses. None of them are true, so we haven't evolved.
Yeah. I mean, all societies have the things that they kind of, keep under wraps. This false
Dirty
image of
secrets.
themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, to some degree, all of us have that kind of. We get our appraisal off of ourselves, but from the standpoint of countries where you have like atrocities in your history, that becomes obscene in the way that it's dealt with.
The funny thing is, of course, Hitler, when he was putting his concentration camps up, he said, "This is the American solution."
He did. I mean, but his standpoint,
That's literally what out of his book.
His argument is unsettling because it's true. I mean, this country was started with a genocide. Yeah. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Brits, when the Brits came over, the Brits had a demarcation point, meaning there was a line that the Brits didn't go past because they assumed this was Native American territory. We're not going to go past that point. America didn't have that perspective, and George Washington didn't have that perspective, meaning the founders understood that they wanted to have a certain degree of, let's say, throwing off the crown. And in throwing off the crown, they can essentially get rid of this demarcation line and just move all the way westward. This kind of manifest destiny. It started with a genocide. I mean, and if you look at Israel is a good example. Meaning, you have a local population. You put that population into reservations. You create laws and structures around it so people in the country can say, okay, that's illegal. Well, you just created that law out of whole cloth in order to criminalize a particular feature. And they would go about criminalizing, killing, and slowly putting them in the pen so they could take more and more and more land, at which point you essentially have the entirety of the country. You've wiped out an entire population. And then you turn around and put another population, slavery. That's a gross history, but that history is often ignored. Like there's no acknowledgement of that. Not in a real way. It's more of like there's just kind of an intellectual acknowledgement, but not necessarily the consequences of that from the standpoint of the various demographics in the society itself.
They won't make amends. That's the trick.
Yeah.
You'll talk, but they won't make amends.
And, Hitler's thing is, look, in 100 years, nobody's going to care. Because in America, in 100 years, nobody cared. It's like in 200 years, people just kind of forgot it and just kept on moving. And so I'll take this burden in order to wipe out 20, I think he said 30, 40 million people in that particular area so we can have that living space and the world will be great afterwards.
And I think it's vital to point out, at least for myself, that this all means we very much love America because it's a possibility. We have never fully arrived.
Yeah.
The promise of America has never fully arrived, and that's what we'd like to see happen.
Yeah, well, it's a promise of America. It depends on who the promise is for, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think that it's broadening. It's broadening. Of course, Schumer and Pelosi may have different ideas. As we know, people currently in the White House do, but I think we're looking at a point. I don't think I would blame the U.S. as much as I would blame late-stage capitalism. There's no one left to steal from. There's no children left to chain to machines, or sell for their parents' debts. So what are we going to do next? Well, we'll have a lot of wars. I have a lot of wars.
And would come up with a reason
some
to
of-
spend a bunch of cash.
The richest land in the world is in Africa, and of course, we've never allowed those areas to exist or to develop themselves. They've always been colonies. And when Trump said about Africa, "Oh, I have lots of friends making millions of dollars there," that's what he meant.
Yeah.
They're keeping war going so that the place can't develop or evolve.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. They always say Africa's a poor country. All of the minerals and resources and oil and everything in Africa, yeah, Africa's supposedly a poor country. It's been chaos. You know, it's hard to kind of develop in chaos. I mean, at one point, Afghanistan was, it's funny. Those Middle Eastern countries, I remember having a conversation with a guy in Portugal, and he was making this point of saying, yeah, those Muslims can't get their stuff together. And I was trying to make the point to him, it's like, you realize that Afghanistan and Iran, these were different countries at one point. The countries didn't look the way they look now, and part of Brits and Western powers have, for the most part, instigated itself into the affairs of those countries, creating all sorts of wars and havoc.
So they never would.
Right. And so his notion of, those countries can never get themselves together is like, clearly your history only goes for like two or 3 years.
Exactly. It's all about context. It's always a big picture, and if we know it, then we're a little more humble and a little more
honest. Context matters. All right, so the last, I guess, commercial break. WRWK 93.9 FM's community radio. We're building a bridge, city to city, left to right, neighbor to neighbor. Engage, volunteer, and support. We are an independent public radio station that relies on listener support to continue bringing you great programming. We are looking for underwriters to support these shows, not just this show. You might have other shows that you might like. It takes roughly $60 a day to keep WRWK on the air, and if you can ensure the life of the station by making a donation or volunteering, information at theworkfm.org. theworkfm.org.
Yeah, theworkfm.org. Yeah. In fact, if you'd like to do WordPress, please stop by the station. We'd love some help with our website. My gosh, it could be so much more incredible and reflect so much more of the things we should be talking about in this area. And the shows we could be putting on that would cover so much more of Virginia and RVA's concerns and interests.
I agree. So I want to end, I guess, on a particular point. At least I'm going to try to make a point. Say for the moment that I, as a person, I had this notion of a business that I wanted to start. And let's say I wanted it to be a store where I was going to house a lot of cheap junk to sell to people at a really dirt price to undercut my competitors, and I was going to have a lot of stuff in the store. And I'm going to call that, let's say, Jamarl Mart. Yeah, Jamarl Mart. And with Jamarl Mart, I say, all right, I need to go to the bank, and I need to get a loan for that. So they give me the loan. I buy a building, and I sit in this empty building with my shelves full of stuff from China, and I stop for the moment because I say, wait a minute. I need something else to make this work. What is it? Oh, that's right. Human beings. I need other human beings to make this work. And so I grudgingly, because I don't want to hire any human beings, because any human being that I hire dings my profits. However, I need this human being just to make this profit. And in that moment, that fleeting split second of a moment, something crosses my mind that I push away. Maybe if it was 3 a.m., in a dream, it might have been more aware, but I push it away. And what I'm pushing away is that in order for me to have any level of profitability, I need a person. I need other people to help me do that. Meaning, Jamarl Mart is not going to be a $40 billion company without having other people to allow me to be a $40 billion company, because it is absolutely, entirely impossible for me to become that billionaire without having those people helping me become that billionaire. Same thing is true, mind you, by the way, for something like Amazon. Let's say I came up with, Jamamazon. And with Jamamazon, I say I have a better idea than undercutting all of these other stores with a Walmart. Because Walmart, I am making $40 billion and I have people on government services. Meaning, I am getting rich by impoverishing people to the point where now the government has to assist their living. As Amazon, I say, you know what, I have a better idea. I don't even need a store. I can make a website. And with Jamamazon, I can essentially undercut Walmart's undercutting. I don't need a building. I don't need any of that stuff. And I can house all of these materials. And then with your Amazon. Again, that split second fleeting moment crosses my mind. Oh, I need people to make that work too.
People.
If I need to make $1 trillion, I need people. Now, from the standpoint of somebody in the 1%, I can kind of understand how they would push away this notion that they need people in order to make their process work. But from the standpoint of everyone else, why do you push that away? It is impossible for Jeff Bezos to have $160 billion without human beings, just like it's impossible for the Waltons to have $40 billion or how much ungodly wealth they have without those human beings allowing their process to take place. It is impossible for any of these guys to be billionaires without human beings either buying their products or human beings doing the labor that allows that money to be funneled up to the top. If that's true, which it is as a flat fact true, how on earth do we end up with a system where 95% of the wealth under Obama go to the top 1%? And it gets worse than that, if I'm being honest. And my audience can see this, even, and they're going to hate seeing it. But it is true, by the way. I want to show, here's another point. Because again, everything that I'm saying here is true. It is impossible for any of these guys to make the billions of dollars that they make without human beings, making it even weirder that the population will acquiesce to this notion that these guys would allow themselves this level of ungodly wealth while everyone else struggles. I mean, it makes zero sense. I want you to see a document that just came out by the Wall Street Journal where they make the point that the profits over the course of the last, let's say back in 2003, the bottom section of the society has dropped significantly, where the top portion of the society has gone up magnificently. And before I even get to that one, take a look at this. Inequality has increased between the top 5% and the middle class. This document is showing that the top 1%'s wealth has skyrocketed, going from, let's say, in 1955, from, I guess that's around 50,000 to 200,000, whereas the medium and the lower income, for the most part, have stayed still, haven't budged. Here's another one. This one is low-wage jobs by country. If you notice, the United States has more low-wage jobs than any other country in the world. These are jobs where you are either making minimum wage or barely making ends meet, as is. And here's one more. Total share of U.S. income from 1913 to 2014. I want you to notice something. The top 1% has 4.9%. The top 0.01% has roughly 5% of the wealth of income, of the share of income in this country. Think about that. 0.01% takes in nearly 5% of the income. That is higher than what it was just before the Great Depression.
But they do clever things, right?
Do they do clever things?
They add value to society?
And here's one more. Wall Street Journal. Bottom half of all U.S. households have 32% less wealth than in 2003. The top 1% have more than twice as much as they did in 2003. I'm going to go back to my example for a moment. And every business that I'm talking about, all of these multinational corporations, all of these guys that are expropriating wealth to this degree, you build the society, literally. The people who serve your coffee, who build your bridges, who serve your meals, your haberdashers, the people who fix your hats, who fix your shoes, who build your computer programs, whatever they do, the people who put the lights, who keeps the air clean, who inspect the water, just human beings that go through our particular society and allow our society to run and to function and to have the majority of that wealth expropriated to the top. Why is that fair? Now, at one point, we had kings and queens, and people thought that was absolutely made all the sense in the world. And at some point, people said this makes no sense, and they got rid of kings and queens. At one point, they had slavery. And I would tell you this, within the context of those systems, analyzing those systems didn't really bring people to the conclusion that something was wrong. However, the moment that you step outside of those systems and you analyze it from either a moral or even just an outright sense of what's fair in human terms, well, slavery doesn't look all that fair the moment that you accept that African Americans are human beings. Nor do the king and queen make sense in the sense that you have a God that you can't see, can't contact, and yet appointed this particular random person to be in charge of you and your own. I'm saying that the same thing is true for the system that we are currently in. The notion that Jeff Bezos and Amazon can bring in $11 billion in 2018 and pay zero taxes should concern you and bother you. Again, I ask the basic question, is it fair? If you're in a situation where you're working for somewhere like Walmart and it is impossible for Walmart to get the money that Walmart gets without the people who are working at that store, should not there be some tether between the people who are working at that store, meaning some investment into the company itself just by virtue of them working at the store, seeing as though they're putting their mind and their muscles and their body into making sure that person becomes a billionaire? Shouldn't there be some tether back to the individual where the company can't just run roughshod? And can we have a question on whether or not there should be a maximum income? How much should a good idea bring in? Should Jeff Bezos really get $160 billion, or will he be okay with $50 billion? I'm asking these basic questions about fairness in regards to this level of wealth that's being expropriated to the top, while the society that we have and the billionaires and the millionaires in the society don't exist without us to allow them to exist. I'm asking a very basic question in this along the lines of this notion of what we consider to be fair. I understand that this guy worked at a company and created Walmart, and that's great. By the same token, the people who are working for him are allowing him to make the billions that he is making. Should they not have some tether to that? Meaning, should they not have some level of investment in that just by virtue of working for that particular company and donating their skills and muscles and abilities to him having that much cash? Same thing is true for Amazon. Same thing is true for any pretty much company in this regard. We need to have a reevaluation from the standpoint of the 99% in regards to what we accept as fair and what we accept as just. It's time for that to change. I mean, these numbers are hellish. I mean, you know, the amount of wealth that's been expropriated over the course of the years. What, 3 people have more wealth than 50% of the population? And when Sanders comes out and says we're going to get rid of medical debt, and people are like, oh, I can't believe he says that. What do you mean you can't believe he says that? The amount of wealth that is being expropriated from people who are working these jobs and are not getting paid wages for these jobs. I mean, if you're working at Walmart, your wages at times are so low, you're literally on food stamps, meaning you're getting government services. The government has to assist in helping you live because they're not paying you wages. And this is a company that's making $40 billion. Amazon had to be shamed into paying their people $15 an hour minimum wage. They're making $11 billion paying no taxes. No taxes. And yet they're complaining about paying people $15 an hour. They're working their people to the bone and yet complains about paying $15 an hour. I'm asking a different point on whether or not this is fair. I would argue that a system of worker co-ops where workers themselves make the choice and decision on decisions for the company. I think that's all fair. My point is this: an increase in unions, one, and in other cases, an increase in the worker co-op sections that allow people to have more agency over their jobs, over their work, and how that company progresses. We don't need CEOs. Workers themselves are perfectly capable in governing the affairs of the company.
You're here.
So I'm annoyed by stuff like this when I see Amazon pays no taxes. And at the end of the day, that money essentially is, being used for political reasons. Jeff Bezos buys Washington Post. He wants good coverage.
Yeah, it's nice to think that somebody in that position of power, that kind of money, would choose to make the world work a little better.
But he does. I mean, he
well,
chooses.
He's not doing a bad job. He's not doing a horrible job. He's not like getting them all addicted to drugs or gambling.
No, it's not that. No, not like that. I just mean like in the sense of paying your workers a decent wage, not having conditions at the factories that are horrible. Some cases they were saying that people were getting like these little buzzers, so they get buzzed if they don't move their hand in the right movement.
Let's call him up and get him on air to talk about what I bet he's trying to do things. I bet he has.
I think
It'll be fun. I'm going to write him a letter.
I would wager Jeff Bezos looks at this from a corporate position of how to maximize his profit, meaning the way people move, their movements. He wants to keep their body position movements in a particular way that cuts down on that type of stuff. He wants them to the fastest way of getting the boxes from point A to point B, despite the fact, people fainting, having ambulances outside, peeing, like having a little thing where they can pee in a cup so they don't have to go to the bathroom. Yeah. I mean, this stuff is obscene. Like these are human beings that we're talking about.
Well, I think he's gone beyond that point. I'm going to write him a letter and I'll tell you what he says, okay?
Let me know. Let me know. I want him on. I want to talk to him.
I'm voting for him. I think he'll turn out all right. I'm praying for him.
I don't think he's one of the Koch brothers. So no. I don't think it's that,
No. Keep your ready. All right.
So I will end that here. It is becoming it's 7 o'clock. It's been 2 hours in your ear hole. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next week. Be safe.
So now we're fading back to our loop, and well, here you go. WRWK LPFM. I better turn my mic off. But make it back here, make sure I have some signal going out.
I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with this laptop. It's so aggravating. I had like several stories, and I just needed to organize the stories, and then I get here, my laptop craps out, and so it's like, oh, what's wrong with the sound? What's wrong with my sound? What's wrong with my sound? I don't know what's going on with this. When I first started the laptop, it had this thing that was trying to do some kind of update. And so I don't know if it's the update that's creating this kind of weirdness with the fan, and I need to see if that's propagating itself into the mic itself, because that's going to be a pain.
Well, I see it. I probably should have had another cup of coffee today, but I promised myself only 1 cup a day because I hit wrong sliders up.
No worries.
Anyway, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Very goodbye here.
Oh, goodbye, guys.
Bye, folks. I'm gonna get back to my.
All right, guys. Like, share, subscribe. And I don't know if I'm going to see you guys this evening, but I'm probably going to cut this video. But if I don't see you this evening, I'll see you tomorrow. So, thanks all.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.
I know, right? All right. And we are off. Like and share. Subscribe.
So.